व्यापृतेष्विन्द्रियेष्वात्मा व्यापारी वा विवेकिनां दृश्यते भ्रेषु धावत्सु धावन्निव यथा शशी व्यापृतेष्विन्द्रियेष्वात्मा व्यापारी वा विवेकिनां दृश्यते भ्रेषु धावत्सु धावन्निव यथा शशी. To the non-discriminating, avivekinam. Viveka means discrimination. Aviveka means to the non-discriminating, to one who doesn't discriminate. Atman, the self, appears to be active when the sense organs are functioning. Just as drishyate bhreshu dhavatsu. Bhreshu refers to the clouds. The clouds, when the clouds are moving, they attribute the movement to the moon. Just as the moon appears to be moving and the clouds are moving. So he draws a comparison of attributing motion, attributing activity to something where it isn't. To the non-discriminating means to someone who does not have this perception, who does not have this attribute, who doesn't understand what? Who doesn't understand that Atman does not do anything. Yet we believe God is responsible for everything that's happening, isn't it? No, God is responsible. Now you got to differentiate this. God is responsible for everything that's happening, but God is not accountable for everything that's happening. There's a difference in using the two words. Now, I hope you get the spirit of what we're trying to convey. God is responsible, but God is not accountable. So you cannot blame God. You can't pull up God and say you're accountable for all what's happening. Means things are happening because of you. We can't take that stance. He's responsible for everything, but not accountable. Now, who is accountable? I am accountable. I only am accountable for my life, nobody else. But when you don't understand the thin line, the difference between what is the role of Atman, what Atman does and what Atman doesn't do, if you lack this viveka, if you lack this discrimination, you keep thanking God or blaming God. How many of us in this classroom firmly believe that God has no role to play in whatever has happened in my life? Badrinath is the only one raising hand. I have no choice but to come to you, sir. Everybody are very neutral. Now I'm getting more votes. In the best of times or the worst of times, you don't have to thank God, you don't have to blame God. Arbiji, have you seriously had this thought all your while? Or you're just agreeing to what we are saying now?
No, I won't say all the while, Guruji. Once I was exposed to this knowledge, it became apparent to me this concept of the electricity, right? It doesn't live in, but it's not acting as the puppeteer in each and every one's lives, and creating the mountains and slamming the continents together or apart or anything like that. I firmly believe, have faith that that's not the case. However, I do firmly believe that there is that impetus or catalyst. I really like that term, right? So a catalyst is something that causes a reaction, but is not changed by a reaction, right? Or it causes things, but it doesn't really have an effect on the outcome. It's just there. And I firmly believe that. Yes, Guruji.
Yes, that is certainly a very profound impression this wisdom has on us. Now, when you extend this idea that Atman has got nothing to do with anything, now the more challenging aspect in understanding all this is to we always what is it one thing we are not able to relate to when we talk of Atman, when we talk of the self, what is it that we are doing all the time and what is it we are not able to? I hope I can get you all thinking in the direction I intend you all to. So whenever we talk of Atman and its role with everything that's happening, as you rightly said, it's a catalyst. It facilitates everything, but it remains uninfluenced, unaffected. It's just there, grand. Its sheer presence makes everything happen, just like we said, like a king. But whenever we talk of it, the moment okay, let's start by the first half of the question. The moment we talk of Atman, what is it that we always tend to do? Or the moment we talk of God, what do we tend to do? Intellectually, I'm saying, intellectually. Can I get you to think, Arpitji? Since I'm with you, I just thought to clarify with you first.
Yeah, so I think we tend to have a preoccupation with prescribing God to to our equipments, to what's going on, right? So we immediately want to give it credit because even though, and I'm going back to one of your other lectures in Bhajagovindam, it's kind of always there, but we don't have enough awareness or sense, right, to realize that is that enlivening principle to the extent of responsibility. But because we're not firm, or our shraddha is not firm, we tend to prescribe what's going on in our lives to that God, quote God, right? And so we get lost, we get mired in that and fascinated with it, right? And so we neglect the fact that we are accountable, and it's almost it's a weakness, I think, that I've learned over the years. It was a weakness on my part to say thank God or blame God or whatever. It's none of those things at this point for me, anyway. I don't know if that answered the question, but
no, your thinking is right. I agree with you, but I'm trying to maybe I'm expecting too much, very unfair when I ask that question. I want you all to think in a particular angle, that's why I said I doubted whether I was able to convey myself clearly. But what you said is very true, very, very true. I can't differ with you at all, Arvindji. We'll leave it at that. I would like to hear from others. Badrinathji.
Pranam Guruji. I think we can't discriminate or distinguish between primordial responsibility and ongoing responsibility. Now, the God or Brahman or Atman, whichever way you conceive it, has primordial responsibility for everything, because there is nothing in the manifested world that happens without the primordial responsibility of that energy which created that manifested world. However, once the world comes into existence, including living creatures like us, the ongoing responsibility for how we conduct our lives, how we think, what we do, is with us. And at that stage, we have to accept that the entity which has the primordial responsibility for everything to happen is just a witness for ongoing events. But we don't do that. And not only do we not distinguish between primordial responsibility and ongoing responsibility, we also tend to attribute gunas to something which really doesn't have any gunas. At least it doesn't have gunas that we can conceive in our mind. So we tend to think that God has a will. And if we go and appease God, then we will get favors, or we will get forgiveness. So we think of God as something with a will to intervene in our day-to-day affairs. Whereas all the verses that we have studied indicate that this sakshi thing, this witness thing, is the most fundamental aspect of how to bring in God into our own lives. If we attribute a role different from that of a witness, then we are making God, we are creating God in our image, rather than in the way it is.
Correct. Very true. So what you said is exactly what I was wanting to clarify. Is the moment we talk of God or Brahman or Atman, we are talking about it as a third person, as an entity other than ourselves. We are separating it from ourselves, aren't we? You're objectifying God. You're separating it from yourself. Never ever in the deepest of your thoughts, there's never a suspicion that I am that truth. I am that divinity. I am that reality. I am that Atman. I am the truth. So the fact that we have separated from ourselves and not being able to innately connect ourselves, then we go about, as you rightly said, objectifying it, separating it. Then you keep believing it has some attributes or gunas or qualities, and then you start believing it has a role to play in your life. Then you go about wishing and thanking, attributing, questioning, why me, why not, etc. But if we are able to think that Atman, the moment we talk of the Atman, you say, I am that Atman. I am the truth. And the moment you say, I am that truth and I am that Atman, you separate it from the matter layers. That is the sadhana. That acute awareness of asserting yourself to be the truth is what is the entire sadhana is, Negation and assertion, when we talk, this is what we're talking. You negate and assert. We don't realize that. We're just distancing ourselves from God. So we don't connect closely enough to that truth and make it our own. So the verse clearly says, to the non-discriminating, to the avivekena, the moon appears to be moving when the clouds are moving, isn't it? We have all experienced that, haven't we? Now, when does the moon move, Ushama? When do you have this illusory experience of the moon moving? But the truth is the moon is not moving, the clouds are moving.
When we ourselves are moving, or
Yo. Don't tell me you're also moving. We are also moving because the planet is moving. But that's not the reason why you experience the moon to be moving when the clouds are moving.
Actually, the clouds are moving. So we feel that as if the moon is also.
Now,
and the clouds are covering the moon, and then when they move away.
Yeah, but when do you experience the moon moving when actually it's the clouds that's moving? It's the clouds that's passing by because of the breeze. You attribute that movement to the moon. But when do you experience that? No problem. Any inputs? Rajima is giving more examples. Can we clarify this and then we'll take the example you're giving, Ma?
Guruji, when we perceive the unmovable to be moving, the static to be, when we are the observers, or when we are ignorant, it's aviveka. I'm just guessing.
No, my question is, when does the moon appear to move when the cloud is moving?
When there's a breeze, when there's a wind, when there's wind and the cloud is moving.
Anybody? Shiva, any idea?
Yes, when we think that the clouds are fixed. Obviously, at that time, we think that the moon is moving.
Correct. When your attention is on the clouds, you attribute the movement to the moon. The moment you shift your attention onto the moon, you clearly know the moon is not moving, the clouds are moving. Isn't it as simple as that? Now, can you convey the gist of the verse? Because it's comparing the example to something. Because the text uses the methodology of upamana, through comparison. So what is the verse saying, Ji?
The verse clearly says that Atman, when you don't realize that Atman has got nothing to do with it, when we realize that, then you don't attribute anything to that. It's a witness. It's not going to do anything.
But when do you do that? See, the sentence I'll read just for your benefit, Shivaji.
Yeah.
Atman appears to be active when the sense organs are functioning.
So when you limit your sense organs, or through your sense organs, you become aware, yes, this is not truth.
No, when do you attribute Atman to be active?
Atman is active in always.
No, we have understood Atman to be the inactive principle.
Yes.
It is
background. It's a background.
Correct. It's like the moon. The Atman is like the moon. The moon is static. Similarly, the Atman is not an active principle. It is the activating principle. See, this is the terminology. It's not active in the sense that it doesn't act. It is enabling action. It is the activating principle. It is the activating principle. It is the inactive principle. It remains inactive, isn't it?
Yes.
Now, so when does the Atman appear to be active?
When our sense organs realize that, when we make our sense organs are in control with us, then you realize.
When your attention is on the material equipments, you attribute the operation to the Atman.
Yes.
But when you shift your attention to the Atman, you realize Atman is not active. It is only the equipments that are functioning. Just like when your attention is on the moon, you attribute the movement to the clouds. We shift your attribute from the moon to the clouds, you believe the moon is moving. So it is the avivekena, vivekena. It is the ignorance of that clarity, or you have that clear understanding as what it is, what is not. That viveka, that discrimination.
Discrimination.
Sir, what a guru can give you?
It's viveka, that power of discrimination.
A guru can only
Guru guides, he shows the light. He doesn't make you to do it. He's only showing the light.
Yes. The Guru, which is the text here, is only giving us the ability to discriminate, giving us the line of thought so that you discriminate. But the text or the Guru cannot give you that vairagya. It
Right.
cannot give you that dispassion to the lower so that you can have a passion to that Atman
Right.
or that union with the higher. That the text, no Guru, no blessing, no Guru Krupa, nothing can give you. It is right to have the right devotion, but we also got to understand what a Guru cannot. A text can only give you that discrimination. So at least we got to develop that clarity and discrimination to be able to see. Hopefully this understanding will help us in consolidating it and translating into wisdom, which is vairagya. Viveka is not vairagya. Viveka is just the capacity to see what is right, what is wrong. And yet I could do what is
Wrong.
completely wrong. It's just like a smoker really understands, he has a discrimination. It's not good to smoke, and yet he can be a chain smoker.
You can take the horse to the pond.
Correct, sir.
தண்ணி குடிக்க வைக்க முடியாது.
அது முடியாது.
நீங்க எல்லாரையும் தண்ணி குடிக்க வைக்கிறீங்க எங்களை.
நான் ஒன்றும் பண்ணல சார்.
Wonderful, amazing. This is wonderful.
So wonderful, Ji. So the appeal is to shift our focus from the matter equipments to the Atman, to the self. Now, what are the two takeaways from this verse? The first is the question you got to ask: when is it that you notice any change of movement? What is it that is required to notice any change or motion or movement? I'm asking a simple question from science. When is it possible you can recognize a change? Or recognize movement, recognize motion? Annapurnama, you understood the question?
When we shift the focus on the right thing, Guruji, we can realize where the real movement is.
Okay. Okay. Yes, ma. When do you recognize the motion or change? Vijay ji.
When seen in relation to something.
What is that something?
I mean, emotion can be detected when seen in relation to something else, as a reference to something else. If you are in it, you can't see it.
Okay. Now, when you notice, what is it that is changing? Can you describe the changing factors?
Changing factors is anything, everything other than Atman.
Okay.
And
what is other than Atman?
The world outside us, our day-to-day all happenings, our mind, our thoughts, events.
Yeah, so the world outside, your physical body. If you don't think you have changed, take a photograph of yours 2 years ago. Take a photograph 6 months ago, 3 months ago. There's a change. Your physical body is going through change. Your emotions are changing. Your thoughts are changing. In fact, the person who's entered the classroom is not the person who's leaving. You're changed. The world is constantly changing. So, and you rightly said the only thing that doesn't change is the Atman. So in order to notice change, the question is, when can you recognize a change, movement or motion? You can only recognize a change from a platform which is changeless, which is not moving. And the only platform that is not moving is the Atman. And the fact that you can notice a change happening even within you, you're very innately asserting that there is the changeless entity, the Atman, which I am, which is within me. And because of that, you're able to say the vasanas change, your intellect changes, your mind changes, your physical body changes, the world changes, everything is subject to change. So you can notice a change from a changeless platform. So you decipher that. So you assert that the Atman is the changeless. And anything that doesn't change is said to be the reality. Now, when you talk in these lines, you always end up being superlative. So please forgive me for talking in a superlative language or from an absolute standpoint. Because it's very easy to switch to that or talk in that language of absolute. Because ultimately what we got to see is how does it help us connect with our day-to-day life. But there are the sections where you have no choice but to talk about the absolute. So when we talk of the changeless is that which fits into the definition of the reality. And the definition of reality is, Seduramanji, can you describe, how do you describe reality? As I've said, it is a changeless that is real. So how do you describe the reality?
Reality is in between.
In between who, sir? In between you and Amma or in between you and me?
Okay, reality is Brahman.
Amma.
So,
Sir, let me help you think in lines, sir. We are talking of two things here. What are two things? The changing factor, the changeless factor.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yes.
We are saying that which doesn't go through change is the reality. So my question is, what is the definition of reality?
Reality is witness.
That which doesn't change.
The reality is that which doesn't change, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what is it that doesn't, when you say it doesn't change means what?
With respect to the outside.
No, when you say change is always measured with reference to time, isn't it? So when you say it doesn't change, I'm not trying to make you all technical, but I'm trying to convey the concept. So reality is that which persists at all periods of time.
Yeah, it's immortal. Yeah.
It's immortal, it's eternal. So that which existed in the past, which exists now, which will exist in the future, that alone fits into the definition of reality.
Yeah.
Now, if this is the definition which you understand, I see that. Now, can you try and fit anything other than Atman into the definition of reality? And see whether it fits into the definition? Anything other than Atman. It's a beautiful sadhana. The thought process can go, because that's how you keep asserting. Can you put anything else into it? Just example, can you give an example and say, is this real?
None.
All right, we are not at your level to say none. Can you help us come to that conclusion?
A mountain, yeah.
Mountain existed when your grandfather existed. Mountain exists when your father existed. Mountain exists when you exist. Mountain will exist after your great-grandchild also. Then he will say, it is very much real.
No, but it keeps altitude, heights keeps changing. Rocks keep changing. So it is changing.
Now, can you give us a more convincing argument?
Ocean.
how do we say it doesn't persist? It doesn't exist.
Planets. Sun.
நீங்க ரொம்ப டிஃப்ரெண்ட் ஃப்ரீக்வன்சியில் இருக்கீங்க இன்னைக்கு. Atman is the only thing which remains to be there. Nothing else persists. Any idea, Vasantama? The world doesn't exist for you all the time.
The air.
It looks like Setaramanji has influenced your thinking. He is only talking Panchabhutas, you are talking rest of the Bhutas. All that. Huh? How do you explain that the world doesn't fit into the definition of reality? Vijayji?
Guruji, only thing I can think of, the universe, I mean, the Brahman existed before the universe was created, and it's permanent, even after all the transformations. Can't think of anything else.
See, you're right. All of you are right. Now, why we are talking is because the text talks of vivekena, trying to give arguments so that we establish the truth. Whether you see it or not is secondary. Whether you have the perception or not is something you got to gain. But establish the truth, isn't it? Logical. We're only trying to establish it so that we gain that experience and vision one day. So the question is, how do you prove, can you prove anything else other than the Atman to fit into the definition of reality, having defined it?
Guruji, can I try?
Who is this? Sorry?
Badrinath.
Yeah, yes, see, Badrinathji. Yes, go ahead, please.
If you really look at what we observe, okay, we observe the world around us, then we observe the sun, the moon, the stars. Now, this discrimination also comes to us through the medium of science. It is also one way of training your mind to discriminate. Now, science tells us that there was a time when the sun, moon, stars, the earth, none of them existed. And therefore, the mountain that we are talking about also, if the earth itself didn't exist, where is the question of that mountain being eternal? It must have not existed. So anything that our observation brings to our consciousness, that the entire spectrum of observation is what we see in the sky above and in the world around us. And if all of them, when science itself tells us that they didn't exist at a particular time, then how can any of those things which you observe, even with the most sensitive telescope, okay, how is it that we attribute permanence to that? Therefore, all that we observe is impermanent, and therefore that which we cannot observe through the senses has to be that which is permanent, because there is the fact that when we observe within ourselves, the fact that there is something which is persisting from the time when we were children till the time we are, in our present state. That something obviously is not changing. It's a child which has become what we are today and all that, but that something is there. So therefore, we have to turn inward in order to find that which is changeless. Because the moment we go into the world outside, even with the most sensitive instruments, whatever we observe is changing.
But you need to have a trained eye or that scientific mindedness to look at and understand and appreciate what you're saying. Very right, though. Absolutely right. In fact, if I can give you all a line of thought, in your day's experience, you can actually say, in your entire day's experience, you can prove this point. I have a few people raising hands. Hariji, before I come to you, you don't mind, RPG?
Yes, Guruji. So is it that the mountain or whatever the experience or item is doesn't persist in all the states? So what you see in the waking state disappears in the dream state, completely gone in the deep sleep state.
Yeah.
And so the only thing that persists is that I, that Atman, Brahman, in all three of those states.
Absolutely. You have sealed it. This is what I was looking at. I know even Hariji is very comfortable. That's what he wanted to say that. I know. Jam also says exactly, she's conveying the same thing. Correct. If you all think along with what Arbichi has said, a profound experience we all have every day. We don't have to seek a powerful telescope. As Badrinath said, Vijay, right, it never existed at some time and then it all formed because of how science has evolved or how the world has evolved. So it never existed before. But our day-to-day experience, the waking world, the problems and worries, the anxieties and joys and excitements, all the experiences, they don't exist for you when you go to sleep. At least they may partially exist in dream, but they totally disappear in deep sleep. Let's say you had a sound sleep and everything disappears. The world diminishes into nothingness. So there is a realm of discontinuity, isn't it? There is a missing link in your continuity of experiences. You may say, it still is when I come back. Okay, when you sleep tonight at 10 o'clock and you get up tomorrow at 4 o'clock in the morning, the world comes back, but the world has changed. It's not that you get up at 10:01 when you get up. Then you can say, sir, yeah, I took a break, but yet the world is the same when I come back. No, the world has changed. So every state you migrate from, the waking, dream, deep sleep, and you're constantly moving from one state to the other, that's a very powerful argument to tell what? Arbiji, conclude. What do you gather from that observation?
So, well, I guess I'm a little lost there, Guruji. So to me, it's that going back to the one thing that persists and pervades all of that.
Yes.
Is the self.
Yes,
right?
it is a self.
And against that, everything else is changing.
Yes. So when you say it's changing, it's not real, isn't it? That's what we are concluding. Now, my concluding point, which I want to take away from that, is what is the conclusion, intellectual conclusion we could have?
That we are also that changeless entity.
Oh. Yeah, before you could assert it, you first negate it. What should we negate? Understand that the waking world is unreal. The dream world is unreal. The deep sleep world is unreal. If the waking world itself is unreal, what about the waker and his little world? And all the problems and all the assets, all your creations, all your life that you have built, it is an illusion, man. There's no reality in it. It's a very, very strong thought. And if you are ready for it, it makes a lot of sense to you. The only thing is, none of us are ready to accept that because we're not spiritually grown enough to hold on to that idea. If you're ready to it can just really hook you up and take you to a different elevated experience and understanding, a profound understanding. So if the waking world is unreal, what about the waker and his work? See, we remember that we give an example of a great social worker. He was so motivated, he was so touched by experience in life. He takes to social work. He does phenomenal work. He wants to build a house for 100,000 people. And building that many homes, 100,000 families, he wants to build homes. And he does phenomenal social work all through his life. He sets up a banner, gets the exemptions, raises awareness, gets support. He collects the funds, puts them into action, builds the houses. Everything is ready. The project is ready. It's a grand occasion where he calls the minister to come and hand over the documents. The documents are prepared on each one's name. So there's no way of anything going wrong. He's prepared the documents. The grand stage is set. The MC announces the first name. The person comes walking onto the stage to collect the document. When the first document is being handed over, this guy falls off from the bed and he wakes up. It's all happening in the dream. Huh? And he wakes up. And what does he realize? 40 years of his social work, all his dream project, if only he had slept, lingered in that sleep for another 10 minutes, he would have finished his life's project and have done my job. I have nothing more to accomplish. But he just tripped from the bed and got up. Would he want to go back to sleep and say, let me hand over that padam at least, let me hand over those documents and then I'm satisfied? Would he do? If you do anything like that, don't tell us, that's all. Please, you can try everything, but don't share it with us. What is that awareness you have as a waker to that experience of the dream? Your whole life in the dream you have spent in building something which fascinated you to serve the society, not to make riches for yourself. You want to serve the society. But what is that awareness as a waker you have to the dream? Man, it's all my imagination. So as a waker, you look at the entire dream as a mere illusion, not when you're a part of it, but when you have the knowledge of the waking state. Exactly the same way we are caught up in the waking world as the dreamer is caught up in the dream world with his dream missions and dream projects and dream aspirations. The moment you have cognition of the real self, you'll understand the waking world is also no more real than the dream. It is no more real. It is only your own illusion. It's your own involvement and attachment. You are completely fettered and shattered and involved because you have no cognition of anything higher than that state. Therefore, these people are saying, Vivekena, have at least the understanding. Some ray of wisdom will come to you. Someday, something will come and help you and say, man, there's no point getting carried away. It's a mere illusion, man. There's no reality in it. What is real is the Atman. Don't announce your problems to the world. Don't bring your problems as if your world alone exists, man. Come on, wake up. Rise above your little small world and your problems and worries. You are just a speck in this cosmos and you're making a mountain of a peanut. Are you the only person who's existing in this world? Is your life alone that matters? Yet when you have a problem, you need help. Like when I had a little problem today, I had to call Harishji and got some help. Huh? So sweet of Harishji to be there, to be well. But that apart. But don't have to make your world a big problem. So if you're able to look at your experience from the standpoint of the Atman, if you're able to look at, bring that thought. See, what the dreamer can't do, a waker is able to do. A dreamer cannot operate in the dream with the notion of the waking state, isn't it? A dreamer cannot operate in the dream with the knowledge of the waker. The moment he has knowledge of the waker, he's no more the dreamer. That is not possible with reference to the dream. But as a waker, you and I have that opportunity to operate in the waking state with the thought of the self, with the thought that I am not this. And the moment you bring in that grand wisdom, the thought that this is not real, this is not it, instantly you develop what is known as Sakshi, as we learned earlier. So the earlier what we mentioned, I explained the thought of the higher operating lower is actually clarified here. And imagine if you are able to attune to that frequency every moment, every experience, you walk in and you come out. You have that grand vision that this is not real. Whew, It's a phenomenal awareness. It's a very high frequency of operating. Go back to the example of the great social work of the dreamer. Then you understand all the work that they're doing is just another dream. Big deal. Carry on. Understand it is just another dream. Then you will not get carried away with it. You will do it. You never know when you will wake up. When you wake up, it has no significance to you. You will not get carried away by all the little drama you're doing and make too much fuss about nothing. Too much fuss we are making about nothing. So how we can inject the thought of the reality? How did we come to this thought? Just a quick recap. We said that you can notice change from a changeless platform. That which doesn't go through change, the changeless is the reality. Reality is that which persists at all periods of time, the past, present, future. And how do you experience that the Atman is the changeless and nothing else fits into that definition of changeless? Through the experiences of the waking, dream, deep sleep. And then we said, from the waker standpoint, the dream world is unreal. From a dreamer standpoint, the waking and the deep sleep are unreal. From the standpoint of the Atman, the waking, dream, deep sleep are unreal. But you can only come to the understanding when you look at the dream from a waker standpoint, just the same way. Learn to look at your waking world from the standpoint of that Atman. Atman is that real, that which persists. Try to take that stance, the grand stance of the Atman, and be an observer, be a Sakshi, be a witness and say, man, this is not real. I will use this experience to get there. If you are able to seal that understanding and instill that perception, you will not be carried away by anything that's happening. You understand it is just. I would not want to give it any more reality to it, because there is nothing in it to give it the reality. It's only my mind that is giving it the real status. There is no real substance in it. Very, very, very profound thought. And this you have to be able to remind yourself every moment, so that when moments you desperately need to instill that detachment, it will help you. It's just nothing but insurance. Just mentally ensure you play by the rules of that state, but understand this is not it. Harishji, you wanted to say something?
No, Guruji, this lecture was so profound. There can be no words after your words. Anything that is said would only be at a lower level.
No, not like that. I felt that you wanted to convey something as I was sharing, so just thought of so. Please, if you have anything, please.
I was just reminded of two things which have happened in your past classes, which are a more base level explanation of this phenomenal concept which you have talked of today. So it will be a more simplified or simplistic interpretation of what you are saying, but it will be a more layman interpretation.
Yes.
One was incident in one of your classes where one of our fellow students gave us a very beautiful example of when you are lost in a desert and you don't know where to go. What do? You climb up onto any vantage point, a tree or a slight hillock, to see where you are and where you need to go. So the message being that it's only when you position yourself at the higher, that you're able to see with clarity. As
Yeah.
long as you are at the same level, caught up in the world, right? You are unable to have the same clarity, right? So the perspective or the sakshi is only when you elevate yourself.
Yeah.
Similarly, I mean, you could say, why can't you drown yourself? But then when you drown yourself, you are enveloped by everything which is unreal. So it's only when you elevate that you will move out of the envelope of what is the illusion. That was one example which I thought very beautifully explained in simple terms, that we need to have a higher purpose, we need to have a higher calling, a higher objective, a higher vision in order to perceive the lower steps of today. And the other thing which I was reminded of was, you quoted in one of your old classes on the same subject at a lower level of explanation. You quoted Shakespeare from As You Like It, where he says, all the world is a stage. And all the men and women are merely players. They have their exits and their entrances. And the one man in his time plays many parts. Anyway, it goes on and on. But all that he's saying is that the whole world is a stage, it's subject to change, and everybody comes in and goes and plays their parts. But this is not an absolute reality. So the world is not the absolute reality. It is only a perception, a stage created by us.
Yes, Ji. Very true. See, every text has got something in it to offer. And this particular text takes you to a certain frequency. It elevates your thought. It transports you to a certain thought process. My appeal to you all is just to take the beauty and grandeur of that thought. I wouldn't take anything away from anything what you all have said, or even Harish gave examples relating from different contexts. There's very relevant. But when we are in texts like this, and when the text speaks, when the guru of the text trying to speak in a certain frequency, it is just to revel in it. It's like an aircraft flying at 20,000, 30,000 feet. And we say the same aircraft is at 5,000 feet. It doesn't have the same altitude nor the peak performance. It just differs. So it's a very profound, it's a very very high frequency thought. And if you hold on to it, it has a lot of ripple effects. So and it doesn't seem all that obvious what we have said. It doesn't seem to be there. You just have to keep extracting it from the text. But just to read the translation before I take up the next verse, I'll get into it. Maybe I'll explain it in the subsequent class. So here he says again, to the non-discriminating avivekena, Atman appears to be active when the sense organs are functioning, just as the moon appears to be moving when the clouds are moving. So we are all caught up in the optical illusion, attributing the movement of the motion to the moon rather than the clouds. Similarly, we are all caught up in an illusion, attributing the waking, dream, deep sleep worlds to be real, when the reality only belongs to the Atman. Nothing else is real. And our purpose of life is to search that reality, to get to that reality. And whatever advice we gain, where you'll be able to maintain the awareness that this is not it and there's something beyond it, will help you to get to it. You are in it, and that yet you realize this is not it. There's something beyond it. You do not know what that is, but just that capacity to say that this is not it. You must feel a sense of suffocation in the life you are living. Unless and until you feel a sense of suffocation in the life you're living, you will not fulfill a greater purpose of life. You will not be able to get on with a greater purpose. Suffocating. You should feel suffocating if you think selfish about your own self. You should feel suffocating if you develop an attachment to your own kith and kin. You should feel suffocating if your thoughts are only confined to your own limited self. You should feel suffocating if you're limited to anything. Exactly the same feeling what Siddhartha had, who became the great. What was Siddhartha? What did he become? The great Buddha. How could, so blessed he was to have that suffocating feeling as Prince. He never found comfort in that. So the verse is only, or the discussion is to create that possibility to invoke the hidden Buddha in you, the hidden truth in you, that he could feel a sense of suffocation in it, a sense of hollowness in it. That does not mean, thank you, sir, I was waiting for an opportunity to leave home and go away. Don't do that. You may have enough reasons to do that, but don't use this reason to walk out. It's not to walk out. It's to be there and yet not be there. All right. We'll take up verse 20. Atma-chaitanyamashritya dehendriyamanodhiyah swakriyartheshu vartante suryalokam yatha janaha. Atma-chaitanyamashritya dehendriyamanodhiyah swakriyartheshu vartante suryalokam yatha janaha. Depending upon the vitality of the Atman, the body, senses, the mind and intellect perform their respective activities. Just like the people in the sunlit world, Surya Lokam Yatha Janaha. Atma Chaitanya, based ashritya, depending on the vitality of the Atman, means because of the Atman, just like the sunlight of the life-giving force, the half the hemisphere is active. This part of hemisphere we are all getting into. Slowly everything is winding down and we all will go into inactivity. And the other hemisphere is all waking up. Slowly, very soon they'll wake up and bristling activity. Everything will bristle into activity. The flowers, the birds, the beasts, the entire living kingdom bristles thanks to the sun god. What would be life without the sun god? There will be inaction, there will be death, literal death. In certain parts of the world where they only see the sun perhaps for a month or two at max. So 10 months in a year, it's pitch darkness. Can you imagine that gloomy world? I don't want to be there in the Shastras. They say this are the sunless worlds. They say we don't want to live in the sunless world. So he compares. So the Shastras often compare the Atman to be the sun. Therefore, you worship the sun god. You chant the Gayatri mantra just to invoke that feeling. So he compares how everything bristles into activity because of the sun. Similarly, he says everything, the intellect, the body, the mind, the senses, everything performs the respective activity because of the vitality of the Atman. See, why he's saying this, perhaps, I just say only intelligent guess, 18 and 19, he spoke about the Atman being a Sakshi, isn't it? He said in 19th verse, it appears to be active, but Atman is an inactive principle. Atman is the activating principle. I hope you don't get confused in the two terms. Atman is the activating principle. It is an inactive principle. Inactive principles means it's a catalyst. Activating principle means it's like electricity. So bring in these two aspects to understand Atman. I repeat, activating principle, inactive principle. Inactive, like a catalyst. Activating principle is like the electricity. So Atman plays that role. In 19, he said that. And in 18, he said it's a Sakshi. It has nothing to do with it. So perhaps when a student hears this, he must have got the impression of the Atman being a very dull, very morose, very laid back entity. So he immediately corrects that impression of that Atman being dull and inactive. He says Atman is that which gives vitality, man. It is that which gives life to everything. It is that life-giving force. So just to counter that impression, he says, just like the sun, Atman is that which is the life-giving force. It is that animating principle. Yet, it animates everything. It remains pure and uncontaminated by all its animations. That remains. It animates it, and yet it remains uncontaminated by its animations. Now, what does it mean? You should be the animator. You should be responsible for everything that's happening, but you should not be affected by all that you have animated. Like, I am responsible for the organization to function, yet I am not affected or influenced by all that I have given life to. I am the head of the family, but I will not be affected by everything that happens in the family. So you are responsible for everything, yet you're not affected by the animations. So you got to draw that concept and try to apply that concept in life. That's there comes the applied philosophy of that concept. Okay. So we'll continue. We'll come back to verse 21 when we see you all next. Okay. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.